Australia's government is under increasing pressure to allow hundreds of asylum seekers to remain in the country. That comes after a report about the health of people being held in offshore detention centres. Earlier this week, the country's High Court struck down a legal challenge to its controversial asylum seeker policy. Greg Navarro reports.
Dozens of protesters lined the outside of Australia's High Court Wednesday after justices rejected a Bangladeshi woman's challenge to Australia's offshore detention policy.
The first thing she did was break down into tears. And I think every one of these people will be absolutely distraught at the prospect of them and their children being ripped from Australia and condemned to a life in limbo.
The ruling impacts nearly 270 asylum seekers, including infants, who were receiving medical attention in Australia. It means the government has the legal right to send them back to offshore detention centres on Nauru in Manus Island.
Now, we'll consider the judgment and its implications carefully. But what I can say is this: our system of deterrence remains robust.
But hundreds of people who gathered outside a Sydney immigration centre Thursday disagreed with the ruling and the country's approach to asylum seekers.
They're much worse off in Nauru, where they have limited access to appropriate shelter, limited access to food in some cases, to appropriate medical care, which is why they've been brought to Australia.
One day after the ruling, Australia's Human Rights Commission released a medical report on the mental and physical health of children living in detention centres.
They've looked at 50 children who've come back from Nauru for medical reasons and found they've never seen children as traumatised.
The United Nations has also urged Australia to consider the best interests of asylum seeker children. Australia has been widely criticised for its tough policy aimed at stopping boats filled with asylum seekers before they reach the country's shores.
Our borders are secure. The line has to be drawn somewhere, and it is drawn at our border.
Sydney's Uniting Church is one of several churches around the country now offering sanctuary to asylum seekers who are at risk for being sent back to detention centres.
If they come here, they will be welcome, they will be cared for, and they will be protected.
Australia's immigration minister responded to the notion of sanctuary being offered at churches like this one, saying no one is above the law, not even church leaders. Reverend Margaret Mayman says that risk is worth taking.
What we would be prepared to do was face the consequences of breaking what we believe to be an unjust law.
Australia's government says any decision about whether to send asylum seekers back to detention centres would be made on a case-by-case basis. Greg Navarro, CCTV, Sydney.